The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for just waiting for us as we just delayed for the last few minutes there, just to allow people who were just logging in to join the group. Thank you all for joining the webinar today. As you're aware, we are basically going through the topic of website testing, essentially how website testing is something that you should be incorporating into your overall conversion strategy and your overall online marketing strategy, and how that can really help you basically drive bigger profits out of your website experience. So just a little bit of, before we sort of get on with the main body of the presentation today, just a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way first. One of the first things I wanted to point out was that currently at the moment you are all muted. So we have a little chat window that you'll see at the bottom there that you are welcome to pop any questions in as they come to you as we go through this webinar. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of this presentation that we'll be able to go through those questions. We may not be able to get through all of the questions, but we certainly will try to get through as many as we can. So with no further to do, it will start with the actual presentation itself when things actually start working. There we go. So there's a few things we will be covering in the webinar today. They are basically, we're going to be going through, why website testing is important, essentially what it is and what the benefits of that are. We'll be going through understanding your testing options, how you go about implementing testing for your business, and then also going through the sort of structure you need to go through when setting up your own tests and really looking at what you can do on your own website to really start driving some of those conversions and really building your bottom line through the utilization of testing. Then right at the end we will be doing, as I said, we'll be doing a little bit of a Q&A session, and we'll also be answering some frequently asked questions that we at Alkemi get frequently about the subject of testing. So just before we get sort of into the nitty-gritty, a little bit about myself. I'll try not to sort of go into too much detail. My name's Nathan Cox. I've been working for Alkemi now for 10 years. Over that time, I have worked with a variety of top-end online businesses, some pure e-commerce retailers such as Zoho.com.au and Deals Direct, as well as financial companies such as Mortgage Choice and ANZ, and a number of others. So I've sort of seen across a wide range of different industries, and throughout all that I've had a very strong conversion focus. My role at Alkemi is as the lead conversion specialist here, and in my time I've sort of worked with these companies to really help them better realise how they can get their website to more appropriately integrate with the buyer, the sort of the psychology of the buying process that your visitors have when they come to your website, and really sort of help drive conversion there. And a really sort of strong part of the strategies that we use is testing, and we'll obviously explain why that in a moment. As you can see, Alkemi as a whole, we've worked with a wide variety of businesses in a wide variety of industries. So we've been able to sort of use that to sort of pull together sort of an educational event like today, where we can actually start going through some of those learnings that we've picked up in our many years of focusing on conversion and pass those on to you. So the first thing I want to talk about is, why website testing is important. I mean, I think it's something, it's something we've all sort of heard a great deal about, and I think there's still a fair amount of uncertainty out there as to how does it actually apply. And as you'll see when we go through a few of these slides, it's actually quite concerning how few people are actually out there testing. And it really is one of those things you really do need to sort of incorporate into your overall online marketing strategy if you hope to succeed online. So right at the start, what is testing? So, I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the basic proposition, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, essentially website testing is exposing live traffic to different versions of website elements. That might be a page, it might be a checkout process, it might be a product display or what have you. And then essentially tracking what the visitors who see each variation do, and determining from that which of the variations your visitors and your prospective customers respond to the best. And the kind of things you can look for in terms of how you actually define that success is, anything from, online purchases obviously being an obvious one, but it could also go through to lead generation, forms being filled in, newsletter sign-ups, anything along those lines. If there's an action that you're trying to get your visitors to take on a website, then testing can help you find out what is the best way to display your content to ensure you have the greatest possible chance of having that positive action occur. Now, just a quick question, just to sort of start things off. You'll have the option appear on your screen very shortly. I'm curious, how many of you who've joined the webinar today are actually engaging in website testing on your business websites at the moment? So you will see popping up on the screen a few more answers coming through. Okay, so it seems like we've got a few people out there. Any other responses before we move on? Okay. So from the looks of things, it seems like we've got a, well, we had a, yeah, so we've got about 60% of you on the screen there. Sorry, we've responded to the poll in the positive, so it's good to see that a lot of you are out there actually engaging in this. You will find this interesting. This kind of breakdown of the 60-40 is actually a little bit of the reverse scenario of what's happening sort of in the wider industry. So I think the fact that obviously you've shown an interest in testing definitely shows that there is some understanding of the importance it can have for your business. What we traditionally see is that the majority of businesses out there aren't actively engaging in testing at the moment. But we'll jump into that in a moment. So let's just go through some, I just want to sort of talk top level about some just basic statistics about conversion and how that relates to testing and just the general sort of business attitude. So we've currently got a scenario where, you know, online businesses surveyed by e-consultancy as to their satisfaction as to their website's conversion rate. We've got a situation where 78% of businesses are reporting a lack of satisfaction with their on-site conversion rate. Only 22% of businesses are turning around and saying, yes, you know what, I'm happy with the rate at which I'm turning visitors into customers or into prospects. Yet despite this, for every $98 spent in acquisition, only $1 of that is spent converting traffic. We've got a situation where most businesses out there have grave concerns about their current conversion rates and what it's meaning for the return on investment they're getting out of their traffic generation strategies, yet they're still throwing all their money at acquisition and nobody's really focusing on conversion. And to sort of give it a bit of an analogy, that's kind of, you know, if you've got a website that is not converting well, and then you're going out there and spending a whole heap of money on building traffic to it, that's very much akin to taking every single one of your leads in a business and giving them to your absolute worst salesperson. You wouldn't do that. You want to give your leads to somebody who's actually going to do something properly, do something proper with them. But we've got a situation where in the online space we've got so many people out there that are just simply not sending traffic to a good salesperson. They're sending it to a poor website that isn't converting. Just some very quick statistics on the importance of website testing. Some figures you may not be aware of. During the last US presidential race, US President Barack Obama raised an additional $60 million in campaign funding through A/B testing. It was a critical part of his success. And this is not really the kind of field that you traditionally think about applying A/B testing to, but it is really one of those strategies that can apply to anything when you're trying to get people to take a positive action. Google's belief in testing is so strong that in 2011 alone, they ran more than 7,000 A/B tests. This is not an organisation that does things on a whim and certainly doesn't do it 7,000 times over just for the hell of it. Google see the importance of website testing to their own ability to service their customers. And what we're seeing is that it's a message that's being picked up. 85% of search marketing professionals will focus more on conversion rate optimisation this year. They believe and understand that it is a key part to the success of their traffic generation campaigns. Unless they're converting their traffic, they can't claim an ROI, or certainly one that's going to make them happy. Fundamentally, website testing gives you a competitive advantage. Only 44% of businesses currently engage in website testing. That should be 100%. Everybody here should be doing website testing, and it's actually quite heartening to see here that our figures are actually, just for the group who've attended today, we've actually got a situation where 60% of you are actually currently engaging in testing, and that's fantastic. Now, if you are testing, that means that as far as the broader market goes, you already got an advantage over 66% of your competitors. You're going to be able to reduce your cost per acquisition. You're going to be able to be more competitive. You're going to be able to be stronger in your traffic generation realms, such as pay-per-click advertising. The benefits just roll on and on. And fundamentally, you want to look at, where do you want to be seen as a business? Do you want to be the old style where it's reactive, undisciplined, subjective, focused purely on gut feel, where you're just making changes just for the hell of it, just because you think it might be better than what you've currently got, and you're just seeing conversion rates and revenue just sort of, move up and down in unpredictable cycles? Or do you want to join the thought leaders, the people who are really focusing on making strong, continuous change to their website? It's small changes getting big results over time through developing a strong sense of statistical certainty. These organisations all engage in testing, and it's always been a key part of them driving continued growth from year to year. So you need to ask yourself, sort of, which part do you want to be? We see a lot of situations at Alkemi where you will have, we will speak to website owners who will sort of, just on a whim, tear down a whole website and then sort of throw up a new one in the hopes that that's better. I mean, if you want to picture yourself as the head of an organisation like Amazon, for instance, would you have the courage to stand up, tear down the Amazon website and rebuild it just on a whim? You probably wouldn't, given the amount of revenue that website is currently worth. The potential loss of that could be devastating. So why are we doing it with our own businesses over here when we're talking sort of smaller time organisations that aren't quite so large? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. We want to focus on testing because that is where you're going to get your gains. So the final thing, just to go through the benefits of testing themselves. So there's a few key things. One of the most important of them is objectivity. We've all got opinions. I spoke about gut feel before. We all have a sense of, this is what I think is going to be best. But why rely on our opinions when we can go directly to the people who are going to use your site, the people who we're trying to actually persuade to do something, your visitors? And that is what testing allows us to do. It allows us to show different aspects of our website, different presentations of our website to visitors. And by watching the data, we can work out which one they like the most, which one they respond to in a way that's going to help build your ROI. And you do this through developing statistical certainty by allowing the data to drive your decision making. You can now make changes not hoping for the best, but knowing that when they're implemented, you're going to see a strong result. But there's a number of other benefits. There's education is something that a lot of people sort of overlook. Even when you have a website test that doesn't achieve the result that you were hoping for, there's still a lot that can be learned from that experience and give you insights into your customers' buying habits that you'd be completely unaware of otherwise. It's a relatively cost-free way to, low-cost way to make improvements to your website. You can roll out many basic tests very easily with sort of very little concern. The other thing, there's also speed. If you're a website with a significant amount of traffic that sorry about that. If you're a website with a significant amount of traffic, you can actually get a result relatively quickly on in the process. And then finally, just the idea of continued evolution, that month after month, year after year, your business is getting better and stronger and improving. Never stop testing. This is a strategy for life, for a business that's serious about online success. You want to continue your testing and make sure that you're just making those continued improvements as time goes on. Just waiting for my... So we've got looks like there's a delay on the slide moving over. I do apologise. There we go. So we are having a bit of a delay here. I do apologise about this. I do have another screen open here where I can see what's actually being transmitted to you guys, and it just appears that there's a bit of a delay in the slide transitions. Excellent. Okay. So the next section I want to talk about is actually sort of go into, I guess a bit more of the guts of testing. Now, we've sort of spoken broadly about what testing is, and we just want to go down into the different types of testing that is available. So there's really lot of people talk about sort of two types of testing. We believe there's sort of three core types that are worth, that really should be the focus. The first type of testing is A/B split testing. This is the most simple form of testing. If you are currently engaged in testing on your website, this is most likely the one that, excuse me, is most likely the one that you're engaging in. And all A/B testing is simply having one variation of having your original page and then comparing that to a completely different version of that page. Usually focus on big sweeping changes to see what overall structure works best. But A/B testing can also be done on sort of smaller elements of the page. The other form of testing is multivariate testing, and this is a much more complex form of testing that basically identifies elements on a page and then sort of presents different variations within those particular elements. And what this enables you to do is actually, through only providing a small amount of additional content, you can actually create a wide range of tests as your sort of chosen testing software mixes and matches the testing solution. The final type of testing there is really another form of A/B testing, but we like to separate it out because, again, it's a little bit more complex, and it's what we here call process or path testing. And it's, as I said, a more advanced form of A/B testing, but rather than focusing on just a page, it's about focusing on an entire process within your site. So a very common example would be your checkout. You might have a 3-step checkout and you want to test moving to a 1-step checkout. Well, what you would do is you would simply build out both, and then you would be able to effectively divert traffic between the two and work out who makes them, basically which variation is responsible for the most sales. That's a little bit more of a resource-heavy approach for a website owner, but it's important to note that with A/B and multivariate testing, the vast majority of the work handling that can be done through the back end of any tool that you're using, or be utilised by your agency to enable to sort of carry, I guess, the heavy work in getting your tests live. Just some points on each of those sort of testing platforms. Some pros for regards to A/B testing. It's generally your cheapest and easiest form of testing, and you tend to get larger conversion gains because, as I said before, we're really looking at sort of breaking out those particular, breaking out into sort of large changes to a page. It does have some cons, and that is that you do have to go ahead and develop each variation and sort of hand design them. It's not ideal for deploying lots of variations because obviously the amount of work involved in doing that. And the fewer variations you run, there is always a greater risk of running a losing test. But as I said, running a losing test is not always a negative. There can be positives that can be taken from that. Multivariate testing, some of the pros there is it's very good for polishing your pages. It enables you to only have to focus on those elements that you want to actually sort of change, which makes sort of the workload in terms of the initial setup a lot easier than doing it in an A/B format, and it allows for testing of a large variety of ideas in a relatively quick time. It is difficult to test layout changes, though, with multivariate testing. That generally needs to be the sole realm of A/B testing. Your conversion gains don't tend to be quite as great, and it is very easy to blow out the number of variations being tested, and as a result, blow out the amount of time it actually takes you to get statistical certainty on a result. So just as a bit of an example here, just to sort of further clarify that nature of multivariate testing, if this was a page we were testing, we could, try a different headline here and make a couple of additional buttons with different colors and try 2 or 3 background images, and what will happen in a multivariate test is that different combinations of all those elements will be displayed, and that will enable you, having only created maybe 6 elements, to test 26 odd variations or what have you. And the final point, as I said, is the process path testing. And as I said, this is quite a complex form because it involves a lot of work at the client, sort of at your end as the website owner. You do need to actually develop out a copy of these paths, so there's a fair amount of investment resource, but it can provide some exceptional gains. The kind of gains that you get from figuring out the perfect number of steps in your checkout can be incredibly strong. Okay, just to, as the slide comes up again, sorry about this, but what you see when the slide changes over, you are going to see a case study just to give you an idea of just some real-world sort of, I guess, scenarios that we've had our, our clients experience. And there we go. So a client of ours was a company called So-Called. They specialised in designer furniture, and they found themselves basically, needing to increase their conversion in an increasingly competitive market. And what we basically did was utilise a very strong approach with this particular client. The strategy involved a very heavy reliance on testing, as well as combining that with our own sort of unique conversion methodologies, which you'll be hearing about a little bit later. And that really formed the cornerstone of what we were doing, and we were able to produce some really significant boosts to online conversion rate and overall ROI. For instance, we were able to receive a 20% improvement in overall conversion rate with a 20% increase in revenue and average value. Category page testing that we ran on their website, we lifted up a conversion rate lift of 35% from all traffic that was entering these category pages, which happened to be one of their most popular entry points. And their checkout we were able to increase to 92%. So you can see, if you focus on testing and you let yourself be guided by data and proven relevance and proven content that is known to work, you can get some very strong results coming through. Now, what I'm going to do now, just to sort of take a break, we're about to go into just sort of talking through, I guess, the setup and development of a testing strategy for your business. Before I do that, I do want to ask a question of everyone, and that is basically with regards to those of you who are currently engaged in testing. Of you guys, how many of you, well, basically, how are you running this testing? Are you doing this in-house yourselves? Are you making use of an agency or outsourcing to a third party? Or are you engaged in a bit of a mixture of both? There's interesting figures coming through. Great. Okay, so it would seem that, so it would seem at the moment we've got about 47% of the attendees here who are actually engaged in testing are actually doing a little bit of a mix of both, and then sort of the rest is sort of half and half in-house, half outsource. Which is, is certainly very interesting, very interesting to see. We traditionally, a lot of clients that we've had come to us tend to come from us, I guess, having done a bit of in-house testing and it not having really worked out overly well for them, and having lost a bit of faith in that process. But, it is interesting, and it's good to see that there are, a number of organisations that are sort of incorporating, a bit of both into their sort of overall strategy, which is great. Okay, so moving on, so obviously when you're going forward with testing, you need to develop a testing strategy. There's no point in wasting your time sort of coming at this, half-cocked, not being being prepared, as I learn how to speak. So I'm just going to walk you through just the basic steps of developing a testing strategy, and then what we're actually going to do, we're going to go into some actual testing ideas that you can apply to your own website. So one of the first things you need to do, step one, and it's it's one of the most important steps of all, is actually deciding what page you are going to test. So you want to sit down with whatever particular analytics package you're using, be that Google Analytics, Omniture, or what have you, and really go right through your page data. Look at your visitors, your bounce rates, look at your funnel analysis, and so on, and determine which pages are sort of the current barriers on your site, which pages are really sort of hurting your website. And as well, if you've got access to qualitative analysis, so if you've done customer surveys and utilise those sort of tools like KISS metrics and so on, make use of that information as well, along with your more sort of objective data and quantitative data, and really sort of pull that apart and work out where the sore points are. Because what you want to do with your testing is when you start off is obviously hit those points of your website that are causing the most damage to your conversion rate. Obviously, if you can bring people on board, and I think one of the advantages, obviously, of having a third party is when you've got people who deal with testing regularly, they know how to read the data. Alkemi itself, we've got significant experience in testing and finding what those right pages are. But at the end of the day, however you go about it, make sure you're targeting the right pages. Nothing worse than targeting a page that really you get a great result, but it actually has no impact on your bottom line. The second step, which should be coming up on your screen relatively soon, is to actually start going through your page variations and actually start creating those. First off, you want to analyse your target page, and there is a bit of skill to this. I sort of want to start off the back, as I said before, we do have a lot of people that come along and say that they've tried testing and they were disappointed in how it works. Often the issue was not testing, it was what was tested that is the problem. The variations weren't had no real basis for being considered an improvement on the originals and things like that. So it really, when you're sort of creating your page variations, you really do want to sort of, if possible, engage somebody with conversion skill, or if you've got the in-house skill yourself, really pay attention to what that page is and where its current problems lie and what you might be able to do to fix those. Have a rationale for what you're creating with the variations that you're going to test. Fundamentally, you don't want to be testing variations that are just different for the sake of being different. You want to believe, you need to have a good reason for every single variation, a good rationale why it should perform better than what you've currently got. That doesn't mean it will. That's why we run testing. But you don't want to be sort of, want to minimise sort of testing lesser variations. You want to maximise your time testing variations that have a high chance of winning, because that's going to be the fastest route to increasing revenue. And so as I was saying, making sure that you're applying the right knowledge is very, very important. When it comes along and you've created your variations, the next step's pretty simple. Get up and run the test. Utilize them with your software package or have your agency build them up for you. But basically, once they're deployed, set your tests live. But don't just set and forget. Keep an eye on your data. Pop your head in every couple of days or daily, however much you can afford. Certainly organisations like Alkemi are constantly monitoring, but make sure you keep an eye on that performance over time. Switch off losing variations once they've proven they are worse than the original. Help speed up your test resolution time. And only sort of complete the test when you have sort of statistical confidence levels that are moving up around the sort of 90%, 97% area. That's really where you want to be 100% certain that you're going to have a great result. Step 4 is simple. Implement the winning variation. Once you know what the winner is, make it your default display on your site. But it is very important to make sure that you keep an eye on your analytics data. You want to be able to actually prove out that this in the real world has reflected what we saw in the test environment. And obviously then you're able to attribute ROI to your particular investment in that strategy. The next thing we're going to be talking about now is actually making your own tests. What can you do to develop good variations? Probably now would be a good point before I actually go into this content just to ask those who have engaged in testing, even if you're not currently engaging in testing but have in the past. I'm curious how many people are actually happy with the results they actually received having gone through that process. So we're going to pop a poll up on the screen, which you should see very shortly. And if you can pop in your details and we'll have a look at the results. It's times like this I wish I had a lovely singing voice or something so I could serenade you all as we waited for the poll results to come in, but there we go. Okay, so we have 61% of you experienced mixed, 17% were unhappy with the results, and 22% were happy with your results. This is not, I guess, not a surprising response. One thing that's really important, I guess, to realise is that the situation we often find when you do have those, testing is testing. Sorry, I just blathered over myself for a moment there. Testing is testing. The whole purpose of testing is that there is an element of uncertainty. There is an element of risk. You will have, experiences where a test doesn't resolve in a positive fashion. As I said, and I will talk about this later, it is still important not to sort of throw that knowledge away. There's quite a good bit of knowledge to get out of a failed test. But fundamentally, we are aiming for good tests. But it is, you've got to expect some good with the bad. It is the nature of it in terms of the ultimate win. But fundamentally, there is value to be pulled out of every step. But what But it is good to see that we have got a percentage of people there that are, obviously quite happy with how their testing's going. But I think the mixed experience, the fact that it's so overwhelming here, I do believe that that's sort of the experience for most people out there. They've had some winning tests, they've had some losing tests, and overall they're sort of a bit ambivalent as to whether it's been an overly great strategy or not. So moving forward and on that, this, what we're about to step through now, really should help you turn a greater percentage of the 61% and preferably all of the 17% into the yes category if we were to do a poll in the future. Now, what we're going to look at next, and you'll see a slide pop up very shortly, is just to give you a bit of an understanding of the basis on which Alkemi ourselves in which we build tests, sort of to give you a bit of an idea of the kind of things we think about, the things that we take into consideration. So we're going to do a little bit of a psychology primer. Now, some of you may already be aware of what I'm about to go through. Basically, there's a key lesson that really needs to be applied to online sales or just sales in general, and that is that demographics are wonderful for targeting your message, but it's psychographics that actually help with the selling. Understanding the psychology of your buyers is so much more important than knowing what car they drive or in which suburb they live. From a sales perspective, that data does have relevancy in other areas. Now, in terms of how we at Alkemi think about the different types of sort of psychological types that come to your website, is that we use a sort of, I guess, a scaled down version of a psychological profiling system called Myers-Briggs profiling. And through that sort of list of personality types, there are 4 sort of broad categories that exist. And these are things that have been identified by philosophers throughout the ages. Plato identified these 4 personality types that you can see on the slide before you, except he used much less attractive terms like blood and phlegm, and that's fine, he was old. So the 4 different personality types that we have here are basically broken down by speed of decision making and the level of logic or emotion in their decision making process. So we have competitives. These are quick-paced individuals who are very logical in the way they do things, very much sort of control people. Spontaneous personalities are our quick-paced, but they're emotional. These are people who are driven by gut instinct, but they make decisions very, very quickly, and they're quite flighty. I tend to liken them to sort of the personality version of a magpie, easily distracted by bright and shiny objects. Then we move into our slower moving personality types. Methodicals, these are people who are very detailed oriented, want to know everything, and humanistics, who are very people focused, and they are more interested in finding out what others have thought of your experience. All of these people visit your website. So it is important that your website caters to all of these people. And there's no, except for some rare circumstances, it's pretty much even Stevens as to the numbers of people that will come to your website, how they're made up. But essentially, they're asking 4 key questions. Your competitives want to know what you can do for them. Spontaneous want to know why they should deal with you. Our methodicals want to know how you can actually help them. And then finally, our humanistics want to know who you have actually helped. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these particular points here, just given the amount of time we've got. This content we will make available later. But just to give you some brief ideas of the kind of content you need to keep in mind for the various personality types. Spontaneous personalities have a strong sense of individuality. You want to make sure that you're using messaging that sort of treats them as an individual. They want small bite-sized content. You want to speak in sort of quick, short chunks. Competitive personalities, these are very much control people. They want to know fundamentally what you can do for them, so offer them evidence. Again, speak to them short, don't waffle, get straight to the point. Humanistic personalities, on the other hand, are more interested in what other people have to say, so they respond well to testimonial content and the like. And then finally, methodical, in terms of methodical personalities, excuse me, these are people who just want all the detail, they want all the information, and in some ways almost want to be a better, more of an expert, I guess, in your product offering than you are before they feel confident to buy. So you need to prove to them that you're at the top of your game and give them plenty of evidence to back up that assertion. When you sort of take that into consideration, when you keep those personality types in mind, this gives you significantly higher ability to actually start making changes on your website that have a high likelihood of being an improvement. This is something that Alkemi applies to all of our conversion projects. Obviously, we don't engage in just testing. It just forms obviously a significant cornerstone of our overall strategy. But if you can keep those sort of personality types in mind, you are going to be able to create variations that are going to be more successful. So now what we're going to do now is actually apply some of those principles and show you the kind of things that we think about and the kind of tests that we run at Alkemi. I'm just going to show you some quick examples involving the home page and involving the product page of an e-commerce website. Okay. Your homepage is obviously one of the most critical parts of your website. It is the page that for many of your visitors is their first experience with your business. It is the page where they develop a context for the overall site experience. Making sure that you set an appropriate sales context, that you provide simple means by which visitors can actually go about the business that they've arrived on your website to do in the first place is absolutely critical. And a lot of this comes down to how you're making use of your main content area. So the main content area, you can see we've got just a website presented there, basically talking about everything that's not sort of side columns, that's the header, the central focus of the website, where you present all your main content. Now, usability studies over the years have shown time and time again that the first thing that visitors engage with when they come to a website, when they come to a homepage, is that main content area. They don't immediately go looking for navigation, and they'll only look to navigation when they can't find what they're looking for in that main content area, when they can't find relevancy to what they came to your website for in the first place. So understanding what is relevant to your visitors is really critical. So here's some things that you can think about testing and including on your website that will prove different types of relevancy to different types of visitors. So if you're an e-commerce website, one of the most important things your website needs to do is quickly allow visitors to qualify their need. I mean, you can imagine walking into, say, a camera shop and a salesperson comes up to you and asks what you want. You're obviously going to tell them, well, I'm looking for a camera of this type, and then they'll sort of start narrowing down by asking you some probing questions and finally work out, so this is the kind of camera that you're after. With your homepage, it needs to do the exact same thing. It needs to allow people to very quickly find what they've come into your website for in the first place. So one of the things that we find a lot of websites do with their homepage is they spend most of their homepage content focused on product promotion. Now, given that website visitors are frequently coming with a particular product or a particular purpose in mind, when you focus your homepage main content area purely on product promotion, you're almost certainly forcing them to utilize your site navigation, slowing down their movement through your website. And this is because, given the amount of space available, you're only ever going to be able to show a small number of your total range of products. If you focus, on the other hand, on category navigation, because that references a wider range of your product lineup, you're increasing the chances that content within that main content area is going to be viewed as immediately relevant to the visitor's current needs. They're going to know very quickly, without referring to navigation, where to click to get to the camera section of your website, for instance, and they start drilling down from there. But it is important to realize that depending on the type of site you are, the type of business you are, and the type of customers you have, you may find that this is not always the best way to go. And this is why testing is so very, very important. We tend to find that websites that are very focused on sales and special offers and the like tend to attract a type of visitor base that are primarily interested in what the latest hot offer is. They're actually not coming to the website so much looking for a particular product. They're coming to the website looking for sales and hoping within those offers there will be a product they like. In those scenarios, you want to look at testing the inclusion of product promotional tiles, but also what is the right balance between that and elements on your homepage in the main content area that are speaking about special offers that you currently have on, sale on women's fashion, or this month only 10% off all products. That kind of information, testing that against just showing your top products can be very important. What is most relevant to your visitors at the moment? How do they shop? And that's how testing is really going to help establish. Other things that you can put in there for humanistic personality types, you can engage in, excuse me, you can engage in testing the inclusion of testimonial and third-party trust markers. Humanistics respond very well to this content. So actually having that display can be a really huge help and really help it drive engagement. So just waiting for the screen to move on. And a final thing that you can look at testing, and this will be popping up on your screen very soon, is value propositions. Making sure that your website is actually giving reasons to buy from your business. When you sell a product online, you've got to sell both the product and the business as a supplier. It's not just enough to sell your product. So include different presentations on your site in the header, down the side columns, try it in the main content area. Look at different presentation of different benefits that are going to make you more appealing than your competitors, that are going to make visitors want to stay on your website. Test different language. How easily understood are your value statements? What are the best ways to provide copy to your visitors in a way that they're going to respond well to? An example that I'm going to show you when it pops up on your screen there is that we have recently done a test on a website that was a mobile-focused website, mobile website focused on fashion. And what we learned from doing this test was by including category images, you can see the original on the left and the variation on the right there. By including category links on that mobile device in a very prominent position, we're actually able to drive a 12.7% lift in conversion from traffic from this page. And by also and that was also in part helped by the inclusion of a value statement across the top, pointing out how much the overall savings present were. And we've got further knowledge from this, because what we learned from doing a similar test on the desktop was that presentation did not work in the desktop environment, and showed that people using desktop tended to be more just looking for a great bargain, and people on mobile tended to be more direction-driven, coming with a purpose. So there's a lot of very sort of useful information that you can derive from your testing that sort of goes beyond just that end result. Now, if there is truly a warhorse that sort of carries the load in your in your e-commerce website, it is your product pages. It's the true workhorse page of your website. This is the point at which the visitor makes their first indication that they're in the market to buy. So how you present critical information and how you frame that information plays a vital role. Selling your product, to be successful, you need to deal with all 4 key personality types, and you need to test to find out what the best way to deal with those personality types is. You need to make sure your product page is presented with a proper understanding of the complexity of the purchase decision. Be aware of how difficult it is to feel confident in making a purchase. It's much more stressful to buy a $10,000 object than it is to buy a $2 object. Keep that sort of thing in mind when you're developing your test variations. Making sure that your purchase calls to action are appropriately positioned. You need to make sure that all these things are working in concert, otherwise you won't get a sale. And and that sort of leads on to the next point, which is just some of those things that you can test. So point of action and value assurances. People won't just buy because you ask them to. They buy based on the perceived value of your offering. But you might need to provide them additional confidence to get them over the line. So look at including point of action assurances near important calls to action. Look at adding security notices, shipping communication, and how you actually frame the language, and also consider where you position these point of action assurances. The less considered a purchase is, the more you can actually push those away from your primary call to action, because they don't need quite so much coercion well, not coercion, it's not the right word, coaxing to get over the line when it's a cheaper item. But if it's a more considered purchase, a more expensive one or a more anxiety-driven one, then you might need to bring those closer in to make people feel more comfortable as they move on. And how you position those point of action assurances against key calls to action is critical, because at the same time as wanting to provide assuring, comforting information, we also don't want to put ourselves in a position where visitors lose sight of the action that they're meant to be taking in the first place. And on a product page, that primarily is your purchase area. This is that sort of primary point where visitors look at the price and decide what they can actually going to add to their cart, and that they're going to make that decision to actually buy. So some options to test here, some great things you can look around doing. Looking at your positioning of different elements. As I mentioned before, point of action assurances, their positioning can be influenced by how considered or difficult a particular purchase is. So for more complex purchases, sometimes it actually helps to lead in with a bit of sort of contextualization, maybe a short summary. For less considered purchases, where things that are really nice and easy to understand, you're selling a plastic bin, you don't need to lead in with anyone. You pretty much just need to tell them the price, and if that suits them, they'll move on. Look at utilising design elements in that purchase area. And just to re-establish that purchase area that I'm sort of talking about, we're talking about that sort of where you've got your pricing, your add to cart button, the quantity box, and so on. So I realise I just sort of leapt ahead a bit on that one. Look at the actual design of that area. Make sure that you test different ways of utilisation of colour and graphical elements to draw the eye and help drive action to your primary call to action being add to cart. Look at the size of pricing. Obviously, when people purchase something, they're going to want to know the price, but depending on how competitive your price is, you might want to, you might get some advantages out of making that price quite a standout element on your page. If you've got products on sale, how are you explaining the saving that can be made? Are you using the dollar value to be saved? Are you using a percentage saving? Are you using a mixture of both? What is going to be the best example, best way to do that for your visitor base? And then also look at different support information. A lot of websites out there put their SKU numbers and in their sort of purchase area. Does the visitor really need to know that? Test adding elements, test removing elements, but have good reasons, obviously, for doing so. Make sure that there is a legitimate reason why you believe that that is going to result in an improvement. Now, an example of this kind of sort of approach where you need to, I guess, take a more overarching and considered look at the way you create variations and your rationale for doing them in the first place is really to look very carefully at what you're trying to achieve, what achieving that may mean, what it might be, what are the potential disadvantages, and how can you obviate those disadvantages. So this is a really basic example that was a website that deals in a very sort of niche market and selling products primarily in bulk. The whole focus of a lot of the business was getting people to increase their order size, and doing that by offering bulk purchasing discounts. Now, obviously, bulk pricing becomes a very important thing in this kind of scenario, because obviously that's fundamentally what's going to drive visitors to understand the advantage of buying more products. But as you can see in the original, our bulk pricing actually took up and these are just mock-ups to point out, they actually took up a significant amount of space, and that our add to cart and all that had to sit quite low on the page. And our concern was that that was taking the focus away from the add to cart. But we also had a problem. This was so critical. If we were to move our purchase area up and place the bulk pricing list below, visitors might end up missing this instead, which is data we need them to see, because, as I said before, we need to drive up the size of the cart. So what we actually did with our variation was we did the swap anyway, but with a slight change. We included this small element here to just point out that there were bulk discounts available, that visitors should buy more, and that the price would update automatically. What that enabled the design to do is actually allow people to understand that there was bulk pricing, and if they look further down the page, they'd probably find that. So we hadn't removed the notice of bulk pricing being existing, but we were still able to lift up the presentation of that purchase area. And that saw a 108% lift in our in overall conversion rates for the traffic from that page, which is obviously nothing to snort at. So I'm hoping that, sort of having gone through that, and obviously there was a lot to go through in a short amount of time, and I do apologise if we squeezed a lot into that, but I'm hoping that's sort of giving you some ideas as to the kind of things that really sort of are going to help you run tests that are going to create strong results for your business. For those people out there that were saying that they've got, sort of mixed feelings about their website testing, or have been very unhappy with the results they've gotten through, take into account those things. Think about personality types. Think about some of the suggestions that we've actually provided there, and apply that to your own testing. or or even bringing on board a partner to assist you. It is a specialised skill, and there's no, absolutely no shame in saying, hey, we aren't, conversion specialists. We need assistance in this. If you bring on an organisation that has got the experience, that knows what they're doing, can run your tests for you, that's going to help you move along, quite a big degree in terms of boosting conversion rate and increasing overall sales performance. But in the sort of final minutes that we've got here, you've all been thankfully shooting through a number of questions during the course of that presentation, which is great. I'm just going to go through some of those sort of over the next 10 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes or so, and answer those for you. One of the questions that came through, which I think is a really interesting one, and it's definitely one that's on a lot of people's minds, is is there a sort of a specified volume threshold that we should be going for before saying yes, a test is done? And this actually brings us through to, and the reason I sort of led in with this is because it does actually pertain to a sort of an FAQ question. That the sort of frequently asked questions that I've prepared for this session, and it relates quite tightly to that, and that is, the question being essentially, how long do tests take to run? Your testing and how long it's going to take to run and how much traffic you need to actually get a result is going to be very dependent on a variety of factors. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that can be very difficult to give you a stock answer and say, hey, look, 1,000 visitors, that's all you need to get a result. I'd be lying if I could say it's that easy to put down. It does come down to how many variations you're running. The more variations that you're testing, the more traffic you're going to need, which is why we recommend monitoring your testing and switching off testing variations as they occur, as they sort of prove out to not be winners, because that will enable you to focus your traffic on those that do have a high propensity to win, and that'll help you resolve your test faster by reducing the number of variations. The conversion difference between the sort of the base, the control, and the variations you're running, the higher that conversion difference, the less traffic you're going to need, the shorter a test is going to wrap up. And obviously traffic itself is a really key aspect of testing. If you don't have a lot of traffic going into your testing, you're going to have to expect longer wait times before you can get a result that you're comfortable with. Before we move on to some next questions, I'll probably just run through some of these additional FAQs for you as well. Another question we sort of frequently get is how big changes should actually be. It's a pretty simple one. When you're starting off and you have grave concerns about your conversion rate, you really want to go for big changes. They're the ones that are going to be making they're most likely to get a strong result. And it's for this reason when it comes to the question of do you go A/B testing or multivariate, the general strategy is to go A/B testing first. Make your big sweeping changes, establish a good foundation that you're happy with, then you can start focusing on smaller, more minuscule changes such as multivariate testing and so on. That will enable you to just continually polish. But every now and then it's good to go back to it and do another A/B test. Prove out that your current design is still winning, because the simple fact of the matter is that your audience will change over time. People's expectations of website usability change over time. So you always want to basically continuously be testing, but every now and then test your foundation as well by going back to A/B testing. Big question that is on the tips of most people's lips and has actually has come up here is, from the audience, is what do we do if our test fails? It's one of those troubling questions because at its heart, testing is dealing with the fact that there is uncertainty when you make website changes, and testing is an attempt to remove that uncertainty. And sometimes in removing the uncertainty, you prove out that what you had was better than what you wanted to go with. That sometimes happens. But what's really important is to not just leave it at that. One of the greatest things that comes out of ongoing testing is the ability to go back to data and pull it apart and work things out and make learnings and learn things about the behavior of your visitors that you wouldn't have known. You now know a whole bunch about your visitors, about what they really don't like dealing with, what does not work for them. That's going to help you do future testing down the path where you'll be able to better focus on those areas that you have proven are actually seemingly more value to your visitors. The key thing is you need to make sure that you're paying enough attention and appropriate attention to the data you've collected. And again, that's it can be a specialised skill, pulling out the right message from the data. And obviously the worst thing in the world is pulling out the wrong message and acting in a way that actually harms your website. So you do want to make sure you really data mine your results. Final question of the ones that are sort of pre-prepared, and I'll come back to the audience questions, is what is the easiest way to test? Testing frequently involves a lot of coding, development. Many site owners may not have easy access to these resources. You may lack the skills and knowledge to pull together the right testing. Bringing on board an agency, as I said, this is a specialised process. I think I love seeing that there's people out there that are doing a mix of sort of obviously their own in-house learnings and still engaging with the specialist. That's very heartening to hear. But bringing in somebody who's had a lot of experience with testing, who's been able to see more tests than you have in your own industry, all those things are definite helps and enable you to progress sort of more in a positive action. As I said, you don't want to be testing bad variations. You don't want to be testing the wrong pages. So looking to an outsourced organisation can always be a very smart part of your strategy if you don't have the internal resources already. So coming back to the questions that had been that we had put through here. One question we had here is in relation to mobile testing, is it becoming more popular, and essentially how is it done? I think this is a very good question. Obviously, and if you attended our last webinar, you'll be aware of how excuse me, of how mobile website usage is sort of growing in leaps and bounds. And if you go back through your own analytics data, I'm sure you'll all see the percentage of traffic that's made up by mobile phone users and mobile data users is just increasing over time. So testing your mobile site is obviously a very, very strong rationale for doing that. So yes, the short answer, yes, you can test your mobile website. It's the strategies involved are not all that different than your strategies in terms of deploying tests and making up variations for a desktop website. You do need to be aware, however, of when developing your variations. Do be aware of the different, I'd say, the different way mobile users act online compared to desktop users. Mobile users they're on the go. They're probably on their way somewhere, or they're just trying to kill a few, some quick seconds while waiting for a train. Then generally people don't sit down and do a lot of sort of considered shopping on their on their mobile devices. So keep that in mind with your variations. You want to sort of keep things simple, and also keep in mind UI considerations as well. Big buttons are better on a mobile device because we've got to use our fingers to touch them instead of a mouse pointer and so on. So as long as you keep all that in mind, from a technical aspect, it's not hugely different to testing on a desktop website. You obviously need to make sure your testing platform will support mobile testing, but beyond that, it's still utilising the same basic principles, and without getting to too much sort of technical mumbo-jumbo, a lot of reliance on CSS descriptors and so on to sort of reformat the page. One question here is a really good one. Will I still need to test on my site if I have just redesigned the whole website? I'm going to say up front, if there is one time that it's never more important to test, it's when you've just deployed a new website. Obviously, you want to give it a month just to sort of for traffic to settle in and the like. But as a general rule, you want to, unless you've got your new website has been sort of designed with some form of conversion and usability expertise behind it, and it's applying to best practices, and your pre-existing website which is fundamentally broken. As a general rule, you don't want to just tear down a website and put up a new website, but sometimes we admit it is unavoidable. One of the so yes, you do want to launch with a new when you launch a new website. Once the sort of traffic's settled down, your customers got used to it, you want to launch straight into testing, because there's going to be a whole heap of areas where you've made some assumptions as to what's going to be the best thing to do. You want to make sure they're proven out, and if they're not proven out, make the requisite changes. But basically, no more important time to test them then. Another good question here is, can you run a number of tests at once? This one is an interesting one. Now, to the best of my knowledge, the vast majority of website testing platforms, the answer is no, unless you're talking about running tests on entirely different properties, such as running a test on your desktop site at the same time as running a desk on your mobile website. We are lucky at Alkemi, we do actually have access to the platform that enables us to run multiple variations by essentially multiple tests at once by segmenting out visitors. But the danger for doing it when you don't have some way of sort of separating out test groups is that you have this sort of cross-contamination happening where your visitors are experiencing one test, then they experience a variation present in another test, and then they purchase. The conversion figures we're looking at, we're not going to be too sure which test variation actually contributed to the win. It makes it very hard for you to rely on your test results and make changes with a level of confidence. A very good question that we've got here is, struggling to do testing due to limits in the way the CMS works. How do you work with, how would we work with retailers that use, for instance, Drupal is the example that we were given. There can be challenges. There's no doubt about that. Generally speaking, though, if your website is designed with div markers and the like, you're going to be in a much better position. You're pretty much going to be able to test most of the things you want to. It is there's no doubt that certain CMSs are more challenging than others. Excuse me. So trying to sort of get your head around, trying to sort of work around the sort of limitations of that can be a bit tricky. But for the most part, if the site's been designed well, it really becomes difficult to test when everything's built of tables. That makes life really, really quite tricky. But outside of that, we certainly from Alkemi's perspective, the technologies we use, it is, as I said before, pretty much all defined by CSS descriptors, which if your website's broken up into divs, I can select a div and tell it needs to be 12 foot high, 6 feet wide, and soft as a downy chick. That we have pretty much total control over that scenario. But it is always worth, having somebody, somebody look over. If you're unsure yourself, have somebody look over the way that the page is coded, and they'll be able to give you a pretty honest answer as to how extensive your testing can be. And probably the question, because we've gone a few minutes over time, but probably the last question I wanted to address here, and I think this one's is a corker, and I won't lie, it's a quasi stumper, but not really. Basically, the question is, if I was to die tomorrow and could only implement one test for conversion rate optimization, which would it be? Which would have the biggest ROI? In terms of giving a simple one-off answer, to be honest, I don't really have one, and for the simple reason is this: every website is different. You can have, one of the first things that I do, sort of in my role at Alkemi, when we have a website, when we have a client come to us and they're wanting testing done on their website, we go right through that website, look through your data, and as I mentioned sort of right at the beginning, determining that target page is all important. We need to go through the data, find out where your website is most broken. That's where you're always going to, assuming it's a relatively highly trafficked aspect of your website, that's where you're going to be always getting your highest ROI. For me to suggest that there's a blanket area that you should focus on that is always going to give you the very best result would be a bit disingenuous on my part. That said, from my own experiences in things that, sort of testing that we've run, if I was to take an average, I would probably focus on either the shopping cart or the product page. And that's just me speaking very broadly and sort of taking out any reference to any sort of specific scenarios a business might be experiencing. And the reason for this is relatively simple. Your shopping cart represents one of the highest dropout points of your sort of end conversion funnel. It's the first point where your visitor, when a person adds an item to cart, yeah, they're saying, I'm here to buy. They haven't said, I'm really committing to buying yet. But when you click that checkout button on a shopping cart, that people do that when they are in the mood to tell you, I am ready to buy now. I wish to make a commitment to buy. But yes, they now need to fill out details, and there can be still further dropout down the line, but the dropout tends to be at the cart because that's the first time they actually have to make a firm commitment. Once they've made that firm commitment, providing extra details in that and sort of working in a way that is true to that commitment is not as anxiety driving, but certainly the shopping cart, there is a reason that people drop out, and anything that you can sort of greet back and grab back can be really, really useful. Another really interesting strategy of shopping carts as well is to look at testing the inclusion of grabbing email addresses earlier in the buying process too. This can have a quasi-negative effect on conversion, but can also really assist you in sort of developing content for sort of building a subscriber database for remarketing and so on. And there can be some advantages to doing that as well. So there's a lot you can do with the shopping cart. The rationale for the product pages, as mentioned before, your product pages are the workhorse of your site. Once your visitor has qualified themselves, this is the page they're going to make the decision to purchase on. And any sort of change that you make here that results in a positive interaction, that's a direct lead into content appearing in carts. And we can't make a sale until there's content in the carts. But I really do want to reiterate, that's me taking averages. There have been plenty of times when I've gone to work on a website where the shopping cart has been fantastic, the product pages have been fantastic, and it's the home page that's fallen apart. In terms of just one sort of additional caveat to add as well, traffic's always going to have a major consideration in that. If there's no way for you to test changes across all your basic product page template, that focusing on product pages can actually be quite a low traffic and approach, which will extend your time. But that said, for most websites, it's pretty easy to test template changes across a product page. But the amount of traffic you get in is also going to have a significant role to play in what I would personally choose to go with, because obviously we not only, as I say to my clients, I don't want to just get you results, I also want to get you results quickly, and there's no point doing that and getting a result 12 years down the track. Look, there's been a lot of questions that have come through. I've gone 10 minutes over time, and I do appreciate all your, all of you sort of sitting in for that and having patience as we went through, that presentation. I hope that was that you found that valuable. I do apologise that I wasn't able to answer all of your questions right away. However, we are going to answer those sort of privately after the session. So if you'd like to stay on, we can get that out to you. We really do want to thank everybody for attending, for being proactive, for responding to our polls, for asking questions. We really do appreciate that kind of visitor engagement. We had quite an impressive turnout today, which was great. So we really do value your attendance. Now we will, just as I guess as sort of part of a wrap up, we will be sending out access to these videos after the webinar, so do keep an eye on your inboxes for a notification where you can view this webinar again if you so wish. It is really heartening to see that there's so many people out there sort of interested in testing. I think just by showing an interest in the first place, even if you're not testing, you're already taking a step above your competition, and that's really, really important. This marketplace is getting more competitive. It's getting harder to drive ROI. Cost per click is constantly going up as the competition goes up. Businesses need to find a way that they can cut their cost per acquisition, and conversion is just one of those things that can do so much in that space, and testing is just such a powerful way, an important way to ensure that you drive on, that you drive those conversion rates. So again, as a final note, thanks once again for your attendance. I hope you all found the webinar informative. I do apologise for those slide delays that we were experiencing. Future ones that shan't happen. But thanks once again. And if you've got any questions, or if you'd like to know more about Alkemi's testing services, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you once again. Take care, everyone.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected.